Welcome to Live Stream of Consciousness. My name is Tom Bianchi, getting things in order, getting the ducks in a row. I have all the time in the world. I don't know why I'm chasing my own tail. Live music is off the table, at least going out to see it for the most part. But, live music has a lot of spirit, and it's coming back. I made a nice little video, and it didn't load. So here, you get live introduction instead of video introduction. Tonight's guest is my good friend, Mr. Brian O'Donovan. And if you are into the music and art scene in our Boston community and you don't know who Brian is, I'm shocked because he's there, man. He's doing a lot of the things that make this town as wonderful as it is. He puts on shows at the Wilbur. I believe it's twice a year, the St. Patrick's Day celebration and the Christmas Celtic Sojourn. And he's been involved with the I think it was Sullivan Stadium. He's a big reason football at Irish soccer, Irish football. Me face talk, make noise. It's a big reason football came to New England. And I know Brian because I've had the pleasure to work under his guard at the Humble Burn Backroom Series, a 100-seat room. And I have been the engineer for that for a long time. And I pay attention. Brian is one of those fellas, every time he says something, it's like words of wisdom. You just lean in and you just pay attention and you let what he says sink and stick, and you realize how much you learn just by paying attention. I'm very grateful for that experience, for those experiences, and I'm looking forward to them all coming back and being business as usual. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, assuming I'm on the air, and I hope I am because technical stuff in this weird COVID age is weird. Ladies and gentlemen, 3, 2, 1. Mr. Brian O'Donovan, how are you doing, sir?
I'm well, Tom. All the better for seeing you there, and great to be joining you, and delighted you're doing this type of thing here. Hats off to you for being innovative during this weird time that we're all in this together.
I'm just starting to do some concerts, and I play every Thursday night, but this here series, I think, is specifically to make up for the pre-conversation, the pre-sound check conversation, the post-show conversations, the chatting we do with all the artists and peers and staff and customers and patrons of live music. I miss that. And that's what this show is all about.
Yeah, how can you not miss it? It's just like there's no second best. I mean, in fairness, I think all of us are saying to people like yourself and other musicians that hats off to being innovative and resilient and getting these things done because there's no other choice. But man, they're such a poor substitute in every single way for just getting together shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, pint to pint, and just chatting about the music. It's just something we all miss terribly. And I think, realistically, I don't want to set a sour note here, but realistically, for the first few months of this thing, or even for the last 6 months, we were kind of optimistic about everything finishing pretty quickly. We'll be through it together and just get it done. But now we're looking at the uncertainties going forward. So it's a reality that we all have to face for, a while longer. And honestly, I'm amazed at the resilience of the musicians themselves, Tom, like yourself.
I think as long as we're healthy, we're all hanging in there. I think musicians are a very down-to-earth. Well, when it comes to this sort of level of you have to adjust to the program, musicians are very down-to-earth people. They get it done. I remember one of the first dumb things I said at the beginning of COVID when someone asked me about the club. I said, the club won't close until the gas stations do. And boy, was I wrong. Like, I just didn't put it together. I just thought, the bar, I've been in that bar with snowstorms and power outages. And the night of 9/11 was a Tuesday, and I had my open mic, and we all went to the open mic. We left the TVs on because we were watching the news. Normally, we used to shut the TVs off, and we let the lights on, and we kind of sat in a circle and played songs and chatted. But one of the most tragic things in American history went down, and we still showed up to the club. And this is a whole, viral epidemic. Jeez, like I just didn't
really
put it together that it would be this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's and that's really what you just described. There is the power of live music and the power of coming together, and quite frankly, the power of clubs like the Burn, of which there are many in the area, where
Mm.
people just go in time of need. But if you think of the underlying reason why they go there is to be with other people, to be close to other people, and that's what we've been deprived of in this pandemic.
Have you done any live type performances or anything? You know, have you tried to get the distancing down, and what's going on?
Well, you remember we did one in the early stages of when
Right.
the club was allowed to open. We actually did one with no audience, obviously, and social distancing for the people, for staff like yourself and me and Tommy and Louise, who were in a bubble band, basically in a group with Tommy and his wife Louise and their daughter Rose and who else was in that?
I think
Harry, right?
Harry was involved, right?
Yeah, so they were a family together. So they did a live thing with us, and then I went to a live one out in a place out in Hatfield, Massachusetts. I didn't even know there was a Hatfield, but there's a beautiful. It's right next to McCoy.
Yeah.
That took a while to get over the internet.
I had it queued up. Right.
But there is a Hatfield, and they did a socially distanced outdoor one. But there's a good example of it. Like for example, that was a concert for 100 people initially, and they sold out 100 seats. They sold out 100 tickets, whatever you call them. Very huge area and everything else. But between the time they sold out the 100 tickets and the time the concert happened, the governor, and again, nobody's blaming the governor, reduced the capacity to 50.
Right.
So they had to scramble and actually they ended up doing a double show. But you can imagine this happening in other industries as well, where people ramp up to get the restaurant ready to open and they've got the stock in, they've bought the fresh fish and the vegetables and hired the staff back, and then suddenly something changes from the government level and they're shit out of luck.
I've hired myself. I've been willing to work for, as a bass player. I got a gig subbing for a bass player who couldn't make a show, and I rehearsed for the show. I drove to the rehearsal a couple times, spent all my time learning the songs, and similar situation. The show literally got canceled. So yeah, it's like you're trying to do this thing. It was already at half capacity, and in a parking lot with cars pulling in, and then it just gets canceled. He's like, I already spent
Absolutely.
this time. It's tough to keep that chin above water. I hope that wasn't an Italian something bad. My chin above water. So what? My mom might be watching. What's my son doing? Hey,
Exactly. What business is he up to? I told you to stay away from that stuff.
yeah, but it's tough to keep your chin up.
It really is. And yet, chin up is what we have to do. We have to be
Yeah.
optimistic. I keep saying, all of us, Tom, in every industry. The one thing that you can say about this, the one solace that you have is that you're not unique. We're not individually impacted. We are, of course, individually impacted, but not in a way that you can go like, oh my God, woe is me. It's so unfortunate that this happened. It's basically happening everybody at the same time around the world. And we just have to basically keep ourselves healthy psychologically, physically, and emotionally during this time, so we're ready for the rebuild, and we will be through it, and rebuilding will be required.
Trying to keep it positive. I know you like to cycle, and
I do.
you were cycling just before the show. And will you ride? Assuming you probably bundle up and ride through some colder months. Did you ride through the beginning of COVID when there was just no traffic on the road?
Yeah, a lot actually, and running as well. I like to run and bike as much for my head as for anything else in my body. But when you get out there, and these days the usual paths like the river roads around here, for example. I live in Harvard Square, so the river roads are absolutely gorgeous. But these days they're fraught a little because you're constantly having to put up and down your mask or keep your mask on or whatever it is. And I like to kind of run, where there are no people. So I get to run around the streets and the sidewalks of Cambridge and Somerville. And it's kind of been an adventure to explore parts of the city and neighborhoods that I've not really been in much before, or even off to the side of them, and you come across really interesting areas. Similarly with biking, you can get away pretty quickly. I bike out near out through Arlington, Lexington, Concord, and up into Carlisle and up into Billerica and even up as far as Chelmsford. And it's just beautiful rural roads. We're very lucky to live where we live.
Well, because there's a trail that goes all the way up there to about Bedford, and then you have cut over, and then there's that one that heads to Carlisle. Correct? I think I'm right on that, right?
You're absolutely right.
Do you ride that whole circuit, or do you like jump in the car and load the bike up and go?
No, I ride it, but I usually generally try to stay away from the bike paths because I ride a road bike, so I kind of like try to ride a little fast, and I actually don't like road bikers on walking trails. But even the roads are pretty good. They've usually got bike sides to them, and they're absolutely fine. But those trails and that trail system are absolutely fabulous for walkers and joggers.
Everything about you is gentlemanly. I love it. It really
Thanks
is.
for saying that. You have no idea what's on behind the screen there. Keep them down.
Yeah, we work together a lot. I know you've seen that side of me because I wear it too close to the skin. I'm kind of a nutcase, but no, I don't think I've seen that side yet.
Well, you never know. It's called losing the temper. But we're lucky. We're lucky that we live in. I'm lucky that I work in an industry where there are a lot of nice people. Sometimes you'll come across the opposite of that. But I think especially now, Tom, to tell you the honest truth, I think when we come back from this, I think people are going to realize that every moment is precious and valuable, and we're so lucky to have it. I mean, what would you give? Like, if you think of the stuff that used to drive you crazy, right? Mm-hmm. You think what would give to be solving or yelling about that problem right now?
Right,
and
right.
It doesn't seem that important anymore, does it?
No, absolutely not. It's well, I have a unique point of view on this whole thing. Last year, as you know, I had like a major health event.
Yes.
So when COVID hit this year, to me, it was like, well, all right, I'm alive. Like, cool. I almost didn't live to see the pandemic of 2020. Like, so I'm very grateful for every day. It's as much as it's, could be, and I suppose it is, no matter what you do, stressful to not be making money, because I'm not making money. I was exclusively in the crowd gathering business. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was, I wrote a comic song already. I've been playing it out. The very first lyric is, I was in the crowd gathering business. I met you at the door and shook your hand. We'd pack them in tight and we'd hug and we'd kiss, and the lights would go down and the singers would spit. And I go into this whole, COVID song, and now I'm shaking down people on the internet. It's kind of a comedy song. But so I've taken this opportunity, like you said, to just go for the walk, go for the ride, think about fitness, just keep ahead about me. Because what else are you going to do,
What else are you going to do? Again, you guys are writing, you and Danielle, I know, are probably writing songs left, right, and center, and staying involved and staying connected even like this. I mean, even chatting. This is good. This is good. Makes me feel good just to be chatting, even if there's not an agenda or anything. But it's good to be talking with you.
Yeah, pint right here. Comedy's starting to go in the back. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, we work together a lot on Wednesday nights, and the show would end about 9:30, and we'd have a nice little bit of downtime, and then comedy night would come on after us, and we would always, the comedians would start to get restless, and they'd start to sort of like do their routine, and we're still having our downtime and the chat. We have the comedy over here in the center, and we're heading off, and then we head to the front of the burn. I miss it tremendously. I punched up some. So here's a shot of Brian, you on the stage. Who is this? Jig Jam?
Whoa, that's a good one. Yeah, good for you. Good for you, Jig Jam. That's exactly who it is. A young group from Ireland who've kind of taken mostly their traditional Irish roots, but have converted it into Americana and bluegrass. That's a fun group and a fun night, and very typical of what we've got going on there.
And so this is the past, and right now, this is the burn stage right there. I thought it was appropriate. I thought it was appropriate.
That's you and me continuing this conversation.
Yeah. When will the people come back?
Well, Tommy and Louise certainly have a sense of humor, and talk about income and getting impacted. I mean, they've been so good to the community there and their staff, and treating people the right way. And a lot of these institutions, a lot of these places these days are open just so they can generate a few bucks to pay the
Yeah.
bills and pay the
Keep the
staff.
staff working. Keep the staff working. Yeah.
And that's legitimate. And hats off to the people who are doing that, and hats off to the people who are supporting them in those efforts.
My young son is working the door at the Burn.
He is. Oh, now he is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sawyer is back there. Great.
Yeah, he
Great kid.
was starting to do engineering shifts. I think he did 1 or 2 for you.
He must absolutely did more than one. He was brilliant. He was better than you, actually.
That's what kids are supposed to be. You got some of them yourself.
Yeah, I do that definitely. That is the correct order of things. But,
Yeah. What is that? What did Yoda say? They are what they're. I don't know. You know what? You got to ask Yoda. I missed that Star Wars opportunity.
You should definitely have a cheat sheet hanging on your camera there.
Yeah, it's the burden of all masters, or something about that. That they become greater than us is what.
But it is true. Like, I mean, again, that's what we have at the Burn, and for people listening into this or who have been there, they know that it had a kind of a family atmosphere. It had that kind of casual atmosphere. That's why it was successful. Let's be realistic about it. It was everything from a date night to a group after a run. Their contribution to the Somerville scene, to just coming in. You could, it's one of the few bars in the city that you could go into by yourself. I was always reluctant, especially as I got older, to go into bars by myself, because people say, why are you in here? Are you in for the booze, or what? Trying to pick somebody up or something. And when you get to a certain age, you go to bars for company, and even if you were just hanging around and you were by yourself at home, your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend was away, the Burn is a place you could wander into and always get into a conversation. No televisions, usually no televisions.
Yeah, almost never. Yeah.
And so you've got a situation where it's literally dedicated to conversation. So.
And with their limited opening, they are doing it right. I've been there a bunch. They're doing it very well. They have the whole back parking lot, and the tables are well more than 6 feet apart, which is nice because my wife and I went for a ride through the North End, a motorcycle ride. So we're out there and it's a good way to blow out the cobwebs, as the Irish say. Just get, it's the same thing. It's like going for a run or a walk, and we went through the North End. I mean, these tables were, if they were 6 feet apart, it was like middle to middle. So in other words, people were not 6 feet apart. And I was very surprised. I was kind of shocked. But the Burn, all the tables are very far apart. Inside, they've built, I don't know, have you been there?
I've been there, but not probably for a month or so. So maybe this happened in the last month or 6 weeks.
They have seating. It's not bar seating because you're not allowed to sit at the bar, but they have like a table and chairs and this big wood barrier, and it's against the bar.
Gotcha.
And they're really doing it right. Long story short, and they have plexiglass, and Tommy and the crew and Brendan and the Irish in general is something I've always loved about working at the Burn. It's like, we need something. Well, let's freaking build it. Whereas every American place I've ever worked, it's like, where do we order that?
No, absolutely.
It's just carpenters and
and
doers,
Today's necessity is the mother of invention. So they're not just building predictable stuff. They're actually kind of innovating as well, and doing what they can to make sure that everybody's safe. I think that's priority number one. And good for them in doing that. But I do miss it. I just do miss the live music, and I miss the chance meetings you have with people who are like-minded people who love live music.
Yeah, I miss that too. I found myself talking to folks randomly here and there, and anybody I met a fella up in Newburyport on the motorcycle, just another biker. Ended up talking to that dude from about 20 feet away for about an hour. I miss that. I miss the random chance conversations. We used to, in our business, we get a lot of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just again, you're talking about kind of a pre-selected group. If they're interested in live music, they're usually interesting people themselves. It kind of goes in that direction.
We were talking about, you mentioned Jig Jam, and I do have like just a couple of things I was like, let me ask Brian this, and I got him nailed down. I was like, I know you bring in artists that are used to big old stages. Sharon Shannon has been in the room. Lunasa has been in the room. Just, great acts. How do you find? You always have kids, and you always have young teenagers and little kids, but they're not just like amateur kids from an open mic. They're world class already. You can see the direction they're going in. How do you find those kids? How do you keep your ear to the ground to see what's the up and coming stuff?
Well, I think it's been a developing thing over the years with the Burn Backroom, particularly because when we started, Tom, if you remember way back, there wasn't really, there were cover bands in there, and they were fabulous and everything else, and occasionally concerts. But I think when we started way back, it started coming online and started developing a reputation. When you start something like this, you've got to go looking for talent. You've got to go out and say, can you come? And they would say, what is it? And what's the deal? And all that kind of stuff. But once you get to a certain stage, it starts to develop its own reputation and attracts people from all over the world. So it gets easier. So you asked the question. I've got my ear to the ground to begin with through my radio program, and that's kind of what I do. It's both my hobby and my life
Right.
work. So, but on the other hand as well, I will say that a lot of it comes to us. We get in calls, as they're called, as they're known in the sales business. And
Is it like back in the day where people send you press kits to the radio station? Please play my
absolutely.
music.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So take a group like Jig Jam. Another group that will come from there, like We Banjo 3, or some other group will go back, or Alton will go back and meet those at a festival, and they'll say, we're going on tour, where should we go? And they go, call Brian O'Donovan, call the Burn, that's where you should be. And I know in your series, you do the bulk of the nights there. It's the same thing. And I think our attitude generally, and when I say our, I mean yours and mine philosophically, and Tommy and Louise's, is to always treat the customers and the bands with the utmost respect. And that involves everything, how they sound, how they're welcomed at the door, what kind of food they're given, what the backstage looks like. That is so important. And it builds a reputation, and people say, we want to play there. And as you point out, you've had the same thing with people like Chris Trapper and various people who would play much bigger halls, who say, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go to the Burn because I know what I'm going to get: intimacy, respect, and a great, great stage from which to connect with the audience.
It's nice having a stage where you have some great names, just long-standing, successful names, world-class talent, and then also to have nights where, like in your case at the Burns, like you know what, these guys are going to open tonight. They're going to open for the Fretless. The Fretless is one of my favorite bands that you bring through. Oh God, they're good. I don't know if you noticed, but I spin their records when I'm engineering. I spin the Fretless records all the time.
They're so brilliant. But your point is well taken there as well. That's something we've developed, is give young people or new people developing their presence in the live music scene. If we've got a sold out concert with Sharon Shannon or in Alton, that's where I actually sometimes go looking for people. And Boston is full of them with the Conservatory in Berkeley and just what they gather. New groups coming up and say, why don't you come? It's like a standard deal. I can even talk about it. It's like $100 plus a few beers and food. But it gives them exposure to an audience that has never heard of them. But if the quality is there, that audience is going to listen to them, and they're going to build from there. And that's the way the industry should work.
Absolutely. It's that's interesting. I was curious to know how you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on around town.
Hey, it's not work; it's fun. It's kind of what we do. We've got some interesting people joining us here. Cindy Funk is asking about Concert Window, for example, Tom. And that ended, if you remember. That was something that you pioneered back when Concert Window was a thing.
I tell you what, I might be able to answer that question. Yeah, Cindy was a regular on Concert Window. Hi, by the way, Cindy, this is what I look like. I was the engineer always answering questions online for you.
And this is what I look like. They say I've got a face for radio, Cindy. That's the old joke.
You know, I was looking for a substitute to Concert Window, and there really wasn't a really good one. And now that COVID has happened and there's a million substitutes for Concert Window, all of a sudden, like all these, like this Restream, it existed. Streaming all these little services, they existed, but they weren't all that great, and they were all labor intensive, and they didn't work so great. But now all these platforms similar to Concert Window are all trying to keep up with each other. So my goal is to take this, what we're doing right now. I'm literally, you know, you can't see me, but I have a little mixing board over here. So I have this mic, and it might make a little noise for you, but I have this mic over here. So if I'm talking over here, Brian, you can hear me. And if I really want to make my point, I get on the mic, you know. Yeah, now I'll be able to do this. When we do get back to business, the Burren Backroom series will have better online platforms. And I think that's something like this, you know, things are going to change. Like my wife is doing guitar lessons, and instead of going to the schools or the houses, she's doing them out of the house. And she's actually like, I don't ever want to go back.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Is COVID is changing everything from work from home. It's changing how we order food, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one of the things is going to change. If you remember, Concert Window was a great concept, absolutely great concept of live. But now look how we're using video. Look at this conversation. I think to Cindy's point, or answering Cindy, is that there is no doubt in my mind that when live music comes back, online simultaneous broadcast will be a thing from every club, and will be accessible, and will be absolutely kind of streamlined and high quality, and no longer kind of a novelty like Concert Window was, even though it was a great ambitious thing when it came out first. I just think online is here to stay, and that's great. I'm absolutely thrilled with that, as long as it's not the only thing.
No, I think it will slowly, naturally merge back from one to the other. Of course, there's going to be some people who don't want to come back out for a little while, and you can't blame them. But I think this, as far as merging in-person live and internet live, this is eventually, when we get back to business, this will be a good thing. And now, like, you know, Concert Window, people used to ask me, like, one of the biggest complaints about Concert Window was the camera. And the camera was the only way I could do this. Well, now I can have that camera, but then I can have a better camera. Check me out, you know? And here I am in this little television studio, and all I need is an iPad or an iPhone. And if I could literally give the link to you, Brian, and you could hold the phone in your hand, and then I could just shoot it back over to you, and you could walk around the room with your phone. And now Cindy and Richard Walker, who's also here, he's a avid Concert Window guy. Now all of a sudden the production is fun. Whereas I looked for that kind of thing after Concert Window went down, and it didn't exist. Yeah. You'd have to be a full out television studio, invest thousands of dollars. Now you can do it with a couple phones in your pocket and the internet.
No doubt about it.
So yes,
you've got a pretty good setup there with the camera switching and everything else.
Yeah,
Miriam is with us as well, and like a lot of people miss hearing live music with all of us at the Burren. We miss you as well, Miriam. But again, we are going to be back. There's no doubt about it. It is going to be back. I think we're still in the throes of this thing. I'm not being Pollyannish about it, but between vaccine and behavioral changes, this is with us for a while, and rebuilding confidence, basically, that we can gather with people safely is going to be the big challenge for our industry, which is essentially, as Tom said at the beginning of this thing, we're in the gathering industry. But then again, Tom, if you think of the gathering industry as ours, like kind of live music, if you actually think the gathering industry is about schools and restaurants and travel and tourism and business conventions and everything else, you're talking about basically the gathering business is about civilization. You know, that's what it is. So we're talking about civilization needing to come back because it has to.
The challenge we have is the word essential. Mm-hmm. I mean, music and arts, of course, they are essential. But, we're the last thing to come into play.
We certainly are. In this situation, we're going to be the last ones to come back online. And, I love what the Wang Center is doing. I've talked to Joe Spalding about this. The Wang Center is doing this Ghost Light series, and that idea
Oh,
of the ghost light. Do you know that story of the ghost light in theaters?
I don't.
If you walk into an empty theater at any stage, there's a light in the middle of the stage. This is like pre-COVID, nothing to do with COVID. Any theater, you'll walk in the middle of the night, the middle of the morning, whenever you go in, there's nothing happening. If I go into a theater to check it out, there's a light, literally just a light bulb in the middle of the stage. And that's called a ghost light. And basically it is there kind of as a superstitious thing. There's a lot of practical reasons as well, so that people don't fall down the stage and kill themselves. But there's also there's also a mythological reason for it, is that the theater should never be totally dark. And so that light is kept burning in those theaters all around the world, that ghost light. And I think that light is in all of our hearts, that we are going to be back. So we need to keep that light lighting.
I had Randy Millman on last week, and
Randy is really terrific. Yeah, Randy works a lot with Passim, doesn't she?
she works with she works with she's on WUMB,
Yeah,
and she works with Atwoods.
Atwoods, that's right. I knew it was one of the.
But she also works with the Wilbur, I think, as far as
she does, and she's a musician. She's a force to be reckoned with around this area.
But she shared with me, and I was well aware of this, that speaking of keeping the light on and keeping the arts out there and making people feel comfortable, she shared with me how much she loved your storytelling on the internet when COVID first went down. Tell me about that. What prompted you to do that? Because that was really cool.
I think it was just, again, like many people in those early days of March were saying, oh my goodness, it was still dark days out there, and what was happening with kids. Everybody felt like they really needed to be connected. And you remember how much harsher everything was, Tom, in terms of people staying away and staying off the street.
Oh, and you're washing down your groceries when they come in the door, and yes,
it was really, and not, we also have a lack of information now, but it's a lot of information compared to what was back there in March. We didn't know how it was transmitted, what its force was going to be. Was it going to get much worse? All of those things. So there's a lot of anxiety out there. So I started kind of telling stories or reading stories online at 7:00 each night. And a lot of folks found it comforting for some reason. An old Irish guy with gray hair and a beard, talking with an accent.
It's my favorite part of the Christmas show every year.
Well,
I
thank
love it.
you. That was a picture you showed. We love storytelling. I mean, the Irish love storytelling to begin with. And I've always loved stories. And kids like stories if they're told with a certain sense of honesty. And that doesn't mean that they can't be fanciful and mythological. But I think people just they like that connection to things that have been around for centuries. And it was fun. It's hard to sustain nightlies at 7:00, especially, everybody in the early days thought this was going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And as it went on and on, I think a lot of the initial efforts just became untenable. But maybe it's something I should bring back. But Randy was always very supportive.
Randy, she told me she loved it. She was like, "Oh, it made me feel so good in the beginning of COVID." She absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
I mentioned your name and she lit up. She's like, "Oh my goodness." Yeah.
So there's a lot of good people out there, and it's great to see them supporting each other and doing whatever they possibly can do, as I said, to keep fit and active during this period of time. How's your motorcycle riding going? You're covering long.
The bike is wonderful. The bike has been an outlet. Now Daniel and I moved in the middle of COVID too, so that's helped to keep us distracted. We had a big move. We planned it just before COVID, and even though COVID went down, we decided to keep on keeping on, and we moved into our first place that we actually own together. It's a small condo close to town, and nothing fancy, nothing crazy. So that kept us distracted. But the bike has been, you know how it is when you have an oddball schedule and you have events and stuff like that. It's hard to get the date night in. And when you do, it might just be a lunch. It might be a random walk. Well, in COVID, we couldn't go out. So it's this way we could have date night. We could just get on the bike and go for a few hours and just, when you get in that zen, when you're on a motorcycle, it's got to be the same cycling. Maybe not walking. Walking, you can get lost in your own head. But when you're cycling, you're in that zone because you're on the road, and
You have to be very careful.
and it's like it's 90% invigorating and relaxing and exciting and all at once, and it's also 10% terrifying.
and you're absolutely right to point that out, because you have to be fully in the moment. And if you're fully in the moment, you can't let those crazy thoughts and anxieties take control. So that's one of the great things about it. And of course, again, I emphasize, and you the same in your motorcycle, and me and my road bike, is we're lucky to live in a place of such natural beauty and a network of roads that are second to none. You can get lost in those roads, Tom, very easily, as you know.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this. Randy didn't even know, and she lives very close to me over on east of where you are, over in Everett, Chelsea, Revere, that area. There is a Northern Strand bike trail over here.
I've only heard of that and never explored it.
It's still developing. Right now it goes from, where the Best Buy, I know people are like, what are they talking about? A couple local guys talking about roads around Everett. The Best Buy off of Route 16. There's brand new breweries over there, Night Shift Brewery in Everett. It starts over there, and it heads up through Malden and then crosses back through Everett, and it crosses Route 1 at Revere, where the cinema is, where the Harley Davidson store is. That's my frame of reference. And then that's how long it is paved. It's about 5 miles. And then is a gravel road all the way into Saugus and Lynn. But they're going to pave it, and eventually it will be paved to Nahant Beach.
That is really amazing. And Nahant, of course, is absolutely gorgeous. That whole area up there around Lynn and Lynn Shore Drive, it's a beautiful place to walk. And Nahant is actually a gorgeous place to walk, and so safe, and hard sand that's really great for walking as well. Somebody's asking, Miriam is asking to find that. I assume it's the storytelling she's asking about, which is I think the stories that I did actually are archived somehow because I did it through Facebook Live. So I think they stay there, don't they? If you do a story,
I think they do. I think you have to remove them.
Yeah, so so I haven't removed them. So they are warts and all, Miriam, if you can check it out.
So when you're scrolling through Brian O'Donovan's photos, getting your fix in, hey, check it out, kids. Hey, what's Brian? You just go to the videos, and there he is. And probably videos of the burn and shows we've done.
Yeah,
stuff
lots
like
of
that.
lives and stuff like that. That's what Facebook is, for better or for worse, kind of a catalog of our lives. But somebody else asked about how I ended up in the U.S. and
Great question.
That's a long time ago, Tom. I first came here, actually.
This is information to me. I'm. Go ahead. I can popcorn.
I first came here, if you can believe it, in 1976. Did you ever see a movie called Dazed and Confused?
Of course.
Like one of the classic movies of the period. Linklater was that who did it? Yeah. And that Dazed and Confused movie, I always said to my kids who loved the movie, really described a night, could have been a night of mine in 1976 when I was a student. I was 18 years old, turned 19 in 1976, so betraying my age. But from that on, I fell in love with the States, came back. That was New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. Then I came to Boston in 1980 and intended to stay for 3 weeks. I met Lindsay during that period of time, and we got engaged 3 days after we met. And that was the end of any plans that I had to travel the world. So got stuck in Boston. Make a long story short, went to back to grad school in 1982 at Emerson College for my master's, got involved in radio there, and that kind of launched my involvement with radio from about 1982 on. So it was kind of an interesting time. Broadcast first on WERS, which is still a great station.
How about that?
How about that is right.
So Randy went to Emerson for a little while, and so did my wife. You're in good company.
So yeah, there's a lot of Emerson alumni around Boston, and from a whole variety of different careers, really, Tom, that came out of Emerson. You know, from the media business to acting to business. It's really a fabulous place, and they've done a great job. The Emerson that I went to was a very different Emerson than it is today. It was around the corner on Beacon Street, a couple of brownstones there, and very, very funky, but
Right.
really a great place to be.
Over near that Cheers, for lack of a better reference.
Actually, Cheers was actually before Cheers. That again, dating myself, was called the Bull and Finch. It still is, and that was our local bar. That was actually that was the closest bar to the. We were at 133, 132, and 134. Beacon Street were our main brownstones, and then we would go to the Bull and Finch for drinks, because anywhere else you'd have to walk over to Newbury or Beacon Street.
What brought you into the craft organization? It was Sullivan Stadium back then?
It was Sullivan Stadium back then Foxborough. Then I was working in live events for during our. Not to get lost in the weeds of it, but during Emerson College, we started a program, myself and a guy called Brad Paul, who was the promotions director for Rounder Records for many, many years.
Oh yeah, okay, I know Brad. Yeah,
Brad is another great guy around the music scene. We started a program, actually, Brad started the program called The Coffee House, which became a kind of a centerpiece for folk and acoustic music in the 80s. And through that, we used to run.
Are you talking about the radio show in the morning on ERS, the
exactly.
Coffee House?
Yeah.
I missed the Coffee House dearly.
It was a great, great program. And in our day, I can say it was great, not just because we were on it, but actually it was kind of a really lively time for music. You know, there was all sorts of people in the Boston area and coming through the Boston area. And we were talking about Reputation earlier on. People would come to WERS. That was the place to do live music. So we were committed to all of that. And in order to get facilities built and equipment in, we had to raise our own money. So we went into doing concerts and festivals called the Acoustic Music Festival at Sanders Theatre. Originally, the very first festival I was involved with was at the Arlington Street Church, if you can believe it. And then we went to Sanders Theatre and did these acoustic music festivals that raised a lot of money. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it landed me squarely in events and event production and live event promotion, which I loved. Foxborough Stadium at that time asked me to come on board and consult on an Irish music festival. I did. And again, they asked me to stay on board afterwards. They hired me, actually. And that was the mid-'80s, not a great time economically. I was married with 2 kids. I needed a job. I took that job, and then one thing led to another. I took over as general manager of the stadium. The Kraft organization hired me when they bought the stadium, and then eventually bought the Patriots. And so I became a VP of the Patriots, and also at the same time was very much involved in the process of having the World Cup of Soccer come in, which it did in 1994, and then I took over the soccer operation afterwards until Gillette Stadium was built in 2001.
Wow.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You said you were in live promotions and production, or just promotions, or just production?
All of the above, basically. I mean, this was the 80s. It was the kind of folk and acoustic music business. So you did whatever you had to do. So,
what do you think, like the percentage of time and budget that must be spent on internet promotion, social medias, and anything? Because that didn't exist back then.
Oh my God!
So how did you let people know? Like, how did you do it?
It was really funny, actually.
For the kids who don't know anything but the internet, how would you explain to them what you did?
And of course, there was let me start in reverse and say that the music industry thrived long before Facebook or Facebook Live or Bandcamp or any of those things. And it was the old-fashioned way. I mean, literally posters, flyers, handouts, postcards, music shops that people would go into. Guitar Center, which didn't exist then, but they're the equivalent of that, the down-home funky part of it.
Street team.
Huh?
Street team.
Yeah, but even street teams was more sophisticated because that was kind of organized. This was really organic. I mean, even at the level of, the equivalent of Live Nation, which was Tea Party concerts, which was Don Law and Frank Russo would promote concerts by getting posters out there on walls and polls and radio stations, radio promotion. Radio was big, 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 big. So you would have to get on radio in the commercial world. That was on BCN at that time. You know, FNX was a much later development.
It really meant something.
It meant incredible stuff because it wasn't as corporate as well. It was a really interesting time because you take people like Charles Lacquadera on BCN, they were often getting into what they call deep cuts. They would curate the content. Today, all of those stations are programmed by computer, but they were real people who are making their own decisions. They were saying, you might love the hit that the Who had on this album, but wait till I give you like cut 3 on the flip side, as we used to call it, the flip side, the B side. And so they were tastemakers, and they were very, very influential in saying you should go to see this band. U2 first played the Paradise back in the 80s. And they were promoted by people who loved the band at BCN, and folks saying, I remember saying, U2, aren't they Irish? You should know them. You know what I mean? As if it was kind of an obscure band that was coming from Ireland, and it wasn't.
And then a journalist like Steve Morris actually wrote about you, and it meant the world. And then you're all set. Wow, you're on the radio, and a journalist bumps you.
100%.
All of that is important today, but it's not the make or break that it used to be.
Much less so. If you talk to people like, promoters, I talked to Maury Aronson, who does such a wonderful job with world music. And we had a chat one day that it said, in those days that you're referring to, if there was an article in the Globe, it was probably good. Now I'm talking about a Somerville Theatre show, 900 seats. But an article in the Globe could boost your sales by 200 to 300 tickets, just a single article.
Right.
And these days it barely makes a dent because it needs so much more to cut through all of the drivel that's coming at you.
So a whole bunch of people putting on shows just down the road, the Burn taken away from the big acts.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a lot going on. There's a lot more going on. There's everything from house concert groups to smaller venues to people trying to pull up shows.
I want to state there because, again, you know, I wear my age well here. I don't hide it. And what I don't want to do, Tom, is to wax lyrical about the good old days. You know, that was not the case. These days, music is as alive and vibrant as it ever was. There are frustrating ends to it for people in their careers. But you and I know, because we're often sitting at that desk in the back of a beautiful room, like the back room of the Burn, and you're seeing talent like you never saw before. On that stage, and that's something to really, really celebrate it. Innovative, supported talent. So it's a great time for art. It's a great time for music. Challenging, yes, but a great time.
Well, you have guests on your show all the time. Do you do in-studio performances? I think you do, yeah.
All the time. I mean, I'm dedicated very much to live music. I believe there's no second best to live music. Radio, which I've made a big part of my career, I always say it's a very distant second best to seeing any music live. There's lots of music, for example, like avant-garde jazz or something. I don't take out a CD or go on a Spotify playlist and listen to avant-garde jazz because I don't really understand it. This is just by way of example. But when I go to a club and see avant-garde jazz, I absolutely love it. I usually kind of go, wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen. It's because it's live and because it's a kind of a language that comes from the artists themselves.
That's been a beautiful. I've loved that. I took over. One night we were sitting around, and it might have been a Thursday or a Wednesday. It might have been after one of your shows, and we're like, and your shows are typically every Wednesday night, and or a lot of Wednesday nights.
Sometimes
you come in, traditional Irish music, and it's always wonderful, and the crowd is just very loyal and dedicated, but we were sitting around like, why can't we do this Thursday? Why can't we do this Friday? Why can't we do this Saturday? And Tommy essentially, I don't know if you know this, he essentially bullied me into doing the series. Like at the time,
I remember it.
Yeah, I had a lot of production stuff going on. I was playing more around town, playing bass for myself and other people, and I was doing a lot of production in studios. I was building my home studio and getting more reps at local studios. I really didn't want to do the series, and Tommy was, with a good buzz on one night, he literally was like, "You're an idiot if you don't do this. He was like, Louise was like, shut up, Tommy, don't, that's not nice." And he's like, "No." And first he's like, "Well," he's like, "No, I mean it. You're an idiot if you don't do it. You're an idiot. You're a fool." Like, he just started berating me, and I'm like, all right. So, but I tell you what, Brian, what I said to him, because I was doing your shows, and back in the day, we would dismantle the entire PA off the stage and bring it to the back of the room because your acts demand nothing but world-class sound, and the Burns sound system was on the stage for the cover bands to use and was beat up as hell. So it's probably the best thing that happened to all the music in the back room, because I said to Tommy, and I'm not sure if I think he's this dedicated, but he also had a good buzz on when he said yes. I said, "I tell you what, build me a sound booth and a world-class system, and I'm your guy." And he said, "Okay."
And he did. I remember.
And he did.
The night you came in, oh my God, it was like you had bought your first Mercedes or something. You were saying, "Wow, look at this thing," and you were patting it and you were making love to that sucker there, Tom Bianchi.
It's I miss it dearly. It's sitting there. It's in hibernation. It's covered up.
And then we got into lights and everything else. It just is a great space. But I want to kind of go back to something I said previously, because Mike Shields, you've got a very knowledgeable audience there, and pointed out actually that it was Carter Allen at BCN that was really an advocate, along with the Steve Morse that you talked about, writing about U2. But Carter Allen was a big supporter of U2 back in those days, leading up to when they played the Paradise and afterwards. So thanks to Mike Shields for saying that.
There's do you get artists that hit you back? And I mean, I see it live on stage. It's kind of a silly question, but like, do you get artists back like, "Man, thank you for what you've done, because we wouldn't be where we are without, you spinning us on the radio or putting us on the big stage,"
I get that a lot, and I don't deflect it, and I really appreciate people saying that. But I do think that that I'm in a very privileged position of being a messenger.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm not a piece of this, but the messenger is important, because it goes back to saying how the position I take, again, like Mike pointed out, Carter Allen, is just taking that position where you're believed. If somebody says, "This guy has pretty good taste," or, you know what I mean, "He has turned me on to this band and they were pretty good, so if he says something about this other band, they must be pretty good." So similarly, Tom, if you've got a series like you've got in the back room, you say, I regularly used to say to people, "You have never heard of this band, but don't miss this concert." And they would, if they go, "Oh, just because you've said it, that's a great thing," then that makes me feel good. But it's not about me. It's just about the position that I'm in, to be able to curate from this bully pulpit, which is 100,000 watts from the top of Great Blue Hill. Did you know that GBH? What does GBH stand for?
No.
Great Blue Hill.
Oh.
The Great Blue Hill in Milton is where the station broadcasts from.
I had no idea. That's news to me.
That's what the call letters are, WGBH, which have just changed to GBH. But it is a bully pulpit. It gets us way out there, and people listen in high fidelity when it was, and FM was very important. Today it's mostly online. But it just allows us to say, if you like this, you like something else, please. And I would always translate that and saying, buy the music, support the music, and particularly do that by coming and seeing them live, wherever that venue, wherever that stage was.
Some of my favorite shows that I've been able to put on are when I have an artist, often from out of town. This fella John Elliott, I'll use him as an example. He lives out West Coast, so he doesn't get out here too much. So he's not pounding this market. He's got a loyal following of musicians, artists from the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival, the Kerrville Folk Festival, and all the festivals. They will come out to support John when he comes to town. And in our 100-seat room, I'll sell 50 tickets, 55 tickets, which is, all right, it's okay. It's a show. But he's so good, and it enables me to hit my mailing list and say, "This one's on me. Trust me. Come check it out." And they do. And those people are fans of not only John but the series forever, because now you just introduced them to their new favorite artist. I really like those situations. Of course, sold out shows are great. Of course, we want them all to be sold out. But that show where you have a little bit of headroom, where you send out to that email list like, hey, I got room for 10 more. Trust me. Come on down, you know? Those are real nice opportunities in this business.
100%, and that's the advantage of having a room like that. And we're lucky, like, you know, we've been talking about the Burnback room, but the scene in Boston, and this is the one thing that concerns me, but I'm optimistic, is just keeping rooms like that going. You know, looking forward to having the Atwoods reopening. They're apparently doing a lot of work there. I love Atwoods, and you know, Passim has been very, very strong. The Lizard Lounge, where you've done your open mic used to do for so many years. I think you handed that over about a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, just a couple years ago, I gave it up.
Yeah, but how precious is the Lizard? I mean, the Lizard is a unique rock venue. Probably my absolute favorite times in there have been watching maybe some of my favorite shows ever. And I've seen, as you can imagine, managing stadiums, you can imagine the shows that I've seen.
There's nothing like that small show where the big artist is playing the small room. There's nothing like it.
If Session Americana is playing in there, or if Dennis Brennan is in there, the Dennis Brennan Band with people like Duke Levine and Kevin Barry, you know, we're talking about musicians of the highest caliber. I'm talking about, like, you know, obviously, it's not just me saying this. They are world class. But when people are visiting me on a Tuesday night when Dennis Brennan is resident, and people are visiting me from Ireland or England or other places around the world, and I say, we're going there, they go, are you kidding me? How come these guys aren't playing Wembley Arena? You know what I mean?
The Dennis, the Tim Gearns of the world, the residencies, It's
just phenomenal, the musicianship that we have here. So when I see that place like Bull McCabe's and I still what's it called, Thunder Road, I still want to call that place Radio, because I remember from those days. Yeah. But when I see them closing, it literally breaks my heart. It gives me a physical pain.
How do you balance now? I try years ago, because I've always been someone who plays residences. I love to play every week. I toured a little bit, I traveled a little bit, but like my favorite thing to do is just throw down and play. And when I was younger, I used to stress out about losing the residency. And a friend of mine set me straight years ago. He's just kind of like, "Wait, what are you so worried about? You think it's the only bar that's ever going to be there? You move on, you know." I try to balance my love for a specific venue with the reality of anything could close it. The owners could simply say, you know, we've had a great run and we're moving on. Or the tragedy of COVID. Like, how do you balance that, you know, like Bulls was having a hard time anyway, as much as to the best with their landlord, to what, you know, not with their business. I would go by there all the time. The place was freaking packed. But if a landlord doesn't want to cooperate, that's that. Like, how do you balance those emotions, you know?
I think it's very difficult. I think you've in the landlord tenant relationship, you've hit on what has sunk clubs for decades, and that's basically landlords saying, no, I can make more money with this as condos. I can make more money of it. It's about the club. It's about the club being there. So the condo's value is going to be impacted by the fact that a club is in the building. I think that's really what happened with Great Scott, even though they talked about other things. But
right.
I think the magic of the marketplace will work to a degree, but I do think that legislatively, city governments can be more friendly to art houses, and I'm including clubs in that mix. Whatever it takes and whatever it is, I think after COVID is gone, I believe that the contribution clearly, if you remember, there was like always studies out there saying, what is the value of arts to our community? And organizations like Arts Boston would have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in these big highfalutin studies and reports and everything else, saying, look, it's not just because people are buying tickets to the Wang Center or to the back room of the Burn or to, you know, come and have a few pints at the Lizard Lounge. That creates an economic model that's about quality of life, about money circulating into other business that you possibly couldn't even think of in such a study. Now very obvious in its absence, the fact that it's not there, and look at the number of people that are hurting big time because of that absence.
It's the old argument, the reason everybody moves to the town is because it's so great. We could go out on any night and walk and see all these things, and then all of a sudden those things are not sustainable anymore.
You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Speaking of which, Tom, it's been great chatting with you, man. This is a great. Hats off to you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Hats off for you for being able to say, like, you know what, that's a good enough amount of time, because I'll just keep going and going and going.
All I need is I think my on tap Guinness needs the barrel needs changing, so that ends my commitment.
It's been a long time since I've had a drink, and I've been kind of waiting for an occasion to have a pint, and I desperately, as you say, you go to a bar in times of celebration and in times of tragedy when you just want to be around people, and I'm gonna mess up her last name, but during this COVID, I don't think it was COVID related, but who's the woman, Marie?
Oh, Marie, yeah, Marie died. Oh my God,
what's her last name?
You have to ask me that now. I'm
oh, sorry, yeah, I might have set it up for you in a bad way. What a fabulous. Talk about storytellers.
Yeah, wonderful.
What a fabulous soul. And more than anything, I wanted to go down to the Burn and sit in what they call the Galway Corner and share a pint with everybody, because she was a singer. She did a commercial for Volkswagen in her 70s. She was a star of a commercial. She probably could have landed a sitcom role after that, and she could sit down. I remember one night after one of your shows, and I'm running around, I'm preoccupied, and and folks want to talk to you, and you talk a little bit, but you have to, you have things to do, and I'm running around, I'm cleaning up the stage. I was just about done, just making sure all the everything's battened down, and she sat me down at the table and started talking, and within a minute or two, I realized, like, okay, I'm in. I'm not leaving this table for a while.
Absolutely, and it was like that. Marie Gallagher, by the way.
Marie Gallagher, yeah.
And, she came from that family. She's really sorely missed. And again, Tom, not to kind of be moving towards the end here on a sad note, but that's an example of Marie wasn't lost to COVID. She was sick otherwise, but when she passed, Marie's life was really, really celebrated in absentia by so many people. We would have all, you and I and everybody else, been gathered at the Burn.
I'm sure we would have seen each other there. Yeah, absolutely. That's on one hand that's a sad note, but on the other hand, this is why I'm doing this series and this Monday night powwow is to chat it up with good friends and keep in touch and keep the torch burning, as they say.
Absolutely, and I just ask everybody who's watching this, or everybody who's involved in any way, shape, or form, just keep everybody in mind. Don't forget about anyone. There's so many demands out there, and a lot of people are out of work. But keep everybody in mind. And all I say in this situation, especially in a situation that in our overall situation where there's a lot of kind of mean-spiritedness out there, and I'm not going to go into anything specific in that, but just literally be kind. Think of empathy when you're thinking of people around, whether they are struggling trying to keep a bar open, whether they're struggling trying to keep employed with their kids, whether they're really missing making music, whatever it is, just reach out somehow and just say, we're kind of here, we're in this together. And when we come back out, we will hopefully begin the long process of rebuilding something that needs rebuilding. Let's be realistic about it. We've seen a lot of warts in it, and it needs to be rebuilt in a different model.
No bad Yelp reviews, everybody. Everybody's just trying. Exactly. Supply and demand is weird. No, wear the mask.
Let's not go too far. There's certain reviews that are okay.
We missed the Burn back room, CJ, as well. Brian, I'm going to let you go. It's getting late. Do you mind staying on off camera for 1 second, and we'll just say a proper goodbye, and I'm just going to sign this thing off about 20 seconds.
You sign it off and give me a call back, and I'll pick it up on the phone from you, and we can.
Gotcha, we'll do.
Wind it up. But thanks again for inviting me on, Tom. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Can't thank you enough, man. You just legitimized my series. Thank you so much.
Hardly, but wonderful to be on with you, and thanks to anybody who made their comments, etc. Keep it up.
Right on.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for this week, live stream of consciousness. You'd think I'd be all ready to say who's our guest next week. I'm not. I should be. I'm my own producer, and I'm not very good at it. And I just opened up my calendar, and the calendar's not behaving. And I thought, you know what? There it is, kids. Oh, how did I not know who's on next week? Will Dailey is our guest next week. Rock star personified. Wow, I have some really good guests on this thing. Who knew? That's it. Thanks, Brian, for being here, and thank you all for tuning in. And we miss you guys out there in the world of live local music, and we'll be back soon. Thank you so much. See you next week. Tune in. Take care. Be safe. Put your mask on. Leave it on in public. Take it off at home. Do what you got to do. We'll get through this. Later. Jump freeze.